And so it's so funny because I was talking to a friend of mine and he's saying, yeah, I was saying I was learning about co-op and kind of talking about what I was doing. It's like, yeah, 'cause I'm interested in doing a housing co-op. Like the first time I heard one person say they're interested in doing a housing co-op.
And it's quite a few of them.
In DC, there are a ton of them too. There's a huge history with.
Yeah. In fact, when Ron did the presentation, it was really mostly DC, right? That was part of that, yeah, because it was Marion, different housing co-ops. Yeah. But
It's not about me. I'd like to find out about them too.
yeah. That was a co-op, huh?
I have one question. What's the Wi-Fi password?
Oh,
Oh, that's so perfect. Yeah, 273.
When I pulled my car that started to rain, it's like it stopped. I had to throw my coat on my head.
Yep. All right. So, hi everybody. Sorry for the delay. My name is Chloe Thompson. I'm the community engagement manager of, oh, right, let me get it started. My bad.
Oh, yeah. Okay, cool.
Let me actually, let's bring it into slideshow mode. Okay, so I'm the community engagement manager of the Tacoma Park Silver Spring Co-op in Tacoma Park, Maryland. I also, in the past year, was a startup co-op developer for Rosie's Grocery, which is a co-op project coming out of Georgetown Law School with Professor Anthony Cook. I'm currently a food council member for the Montgomery County Food Council. I'm a Montgomery County woman, but we sit on the line. Our co-op truly sits right between Montgomery County and DC, and we serve primarily both regions. This is my 4th year doing the work that I do. I do marketing, social media, graphic design, event planning, the whole, everything that you could fit under the title of community engagement. That's what I do. I'm a team of one. Excited to talk to you all tonight about marketing. And also, I just did this presentation last night in DC, so I have more thoughts about more things. As I said to the group last night, my GM and I were going over this list yesterday, and he said there was too much stuff. But I actually don't think that there's, I think that it's like a continually evolving presentation. So let's just jump into it. Okay, why cooperative economics? So we have a board of 9 member owners who represent our board at my store, and we can talk more about how I'm interested to see how your co-op operates and how it's different than ours. The board president of my store said recently in an interview section that we're doing in our newsletter, we need co-ops more than ever because we're in a time of impending oligarchy. Corporations are becoming stronger. We need more institutions for the people. This is the working definition that we work off of at my store for what a co-op is. You all are probably very familiar, but a co-op puts power back into the hands of the people through its radical economic structure. We are completely community run. All of our board members just happened this year to live within the city of Tacoma Park. It's not always that way. The co-op has 12,000 member owners from all throughout the DMV. So we could take in people from wherever as long as you have ownership in our store. This now feels, after doing this yesterday, it feels important to bring up. So is $100 to become a member owner of our store one time. You can take that money out if you don't want to be a part of the store anymore. That's like our working capital. Our bookkeeper hates that we have it set up that way because people really do move out of Tacoma Park and request that money back all the time. That happens at least 2 or 3 times a week. Back to the points themselves. I had okay. I read this quote yesterday and it felt very helpful. There's a book by John Steinman called Grocery Story, which is the story of grocery co-ops in comparison to the history of American corporate takeover. And in the book, John Steinman writes, another often overlooked influence on the rise to power of chain retailers has been consumer naivete or indifference. Today, the dominance of the chain stores operating in our communities elicits little more than a murmur among eaters. Instead, dissent within the food system is often placed on the Monsantos, Coca-Colas, and McDonald's of the world. Rarely do we see campaigns to expose Kroger's, Whole Foods, Safeway, or Shop and Save for their influence on food, people, and the planet. Compared to the chain store uprisings of the 1920s and 1930s, North American eaters and regulators have been asleep at the plate. We talk about this a lot in the work that we do at my store because often, exactly as, go ahead. Hmm. Like just widen. Oh, that's me. Can I put it back so I can see the slides?
Okay.
And I have no clue how to do that.
Hold on a second. The slides are full.
Because you are probably just seeing the show itself too. Yep. Oh, yep. That'd be perfect. Yeah, and then you did.
Yeah.
Yep. Let's see. But can I still control it? Technical difficulties, ladies. I apologize. And someone had something to say in the chat too, which is quite surprising.
Right.
I actually, well,
Let me go back to maybe talking to you.
like I can't press through. We don't I can't. I actually think the way that it was set up before, they could still see what was on the screen, but now we're screen sharing and it's like
Um,
here, 2 seconds. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Good. Yes. You guys can see it too?
Yeah.
We're good?
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Difference between corporations, the dissent for corporations and the dissent towards corporate grocery stores. I often find, and we talked about this a lot last night too, Tacoma Park is a relatively wealthy part of the DMV area, and it's been that way for a little bit. But part of the reason why I feel like it attracts a certain kind of person is because we control the food system in our area. There are no corporations in Tacoma Park within the city limits, and that applies not just to grocery stores, but to general business. I feel like the feeling in our community is not only a feeling of corporate power is too large, but also corporate grocery stores and what they do within their communities should also be pushed against. That quote meant a lot to me, and I wanted to read it out first, just because I often do food organizing with people who seem to have a lot of hate for, as Steinman says, Coca-Cola, McDonald's, Monsanto, big names that we're familiar with, but the grocery store in your community is often the largest leech on the people who live there. Most people across class levels, race levels, gender, whatever differentiator you'd like, are all shopping in the same place. People change when it comes to the smaller things that they're buying from different stores, but the grocery store is the biggest hub of interaction in your community. The ability to control that is the ability to create real change in your community. All right, cool. So when I was doing research on this presentation, I was reading up on the Cornell School of Business's cooperative extension. I wanted to highlight some things that felt really important to me. And we'll come back to these terms several times within this presentation because the bedrock on which cooperative economics to me starts out with is the idea that co-ops are mutual help associations, especially historically in the Black community, but just in general with how we run our business and how they should be operating within communities. So the third quote to me is the most important. Cooperatives provide a unique link to communities in that their member owners are usually concentrated in a specific area. The social and economic benefits flowing, this quote is, the last sentence is wrong, but I'm gonna go through it anyway. The social and economic benefits flowing from the cooperative can something from the from the cooperative into the community in terms of building leadership, ripple effects of business activity, and benevolence of the organization. The second point is secondarily important to me. Cooperatives may be formed to fight monopolies, corruption, exploitation, and marginalization that can only be achieved through group action. Last night, some of the women that came out to speak were from Southeast DC, and one of the biggest issues that they had was that they were feeding people on the ground actively through free food programs, very deeply inspired by the Black Panthers work. And both in the communities in which they were serving, the biggest issues seemed to be one, that people were having a really hard time accessing fresh, delicious food for a cheap price. And two, that the organizations or businesses that had been in the community that were seeming to serve that need were all inherently exploitative in structure. So they had a organic grocery store come into their community that was charging like, and they were saying this was before the rise of egg prices, charging like $10 or $12 for a carton of eggs. in an organic market setting. People can only not afford to pay for that, but it sets a certain price perception as to what organic and natural foods are supposed to cost. Our pricing model is always, because we're part, and we'll talk about this later, since my co-op is part of a larger cooperative called the National Cooperative Grocers, our collective buying power makes it really easy for us to get groceries for a lot cheaper than they would usually be. I know that you all don't have, and to me, this boggles my mind that we have a grocery cooperative in the DC area and there isn't one in Baltimore. That has always struck me as very, because Baltimore has a lot of co-ops, more than we have, especially in concentrated areas. Not with food, no. With a bunch of different, I did a presentation for it for this organization like last year and was asking about this. And a lot of the Black organizers were like, oh, they were for white people, which I pushed against too, because I was like, I don't even know if that's necessarily true. It felt like a lot of people just didn't know about a lot of the co-ops and then were like set up to labeling them as something for only like college educated white people. This is not my city. I don't know, you know.
I don't know, probably just was like people lost colonialism and this whole individualization, and then, you know, what is healthy eating is very fluid, you know, what is healthy eating. But to me, that was a reflection of the fact that that person didn't feel like they connected to me.
That's what it felt like to me too. Hi, how are you?
Most of us
Good.
in our history come from it since.
Yep.
You know, for somebody to say that, it's kind of like they just don't know anything about their own family history.
And it also, the history of you all know this, and I'm probably saying something that everyone in the room is familiar with. The history of co-ops is pretty Black in the state specifically. The idea of cooperative organizations being like a systems for upper middle class white people is a fairly like last 20 years of economic development situation that's like really new. My co-op is incredibly financially successful. We're known for that reason. Part of that is because we're in a wealthy area, but we're not primarily white. And our workers are not, we have 50 people on staff. I work with 4 white people. Like it really is, when I meet other people who assume that, this is the first co-op that I knew anything about. I never thought about this system as that ever. Yeah. Can you introduce yourself? I'm sorry. You're okay. Lynn. You guys are well represented. That's crazy. Okay, I have more questions about your co-op, but we'll get into that too.
That's why we're so well represented here, because we made a commitment as an organization to have our board members and our staff in the stream so that we can get the education and knowledge and connections we need to be able to take that next week.
That's awesome. Okay, thanks you guys for being here. All right, there's something in my eye, which is so awesome in the middle of my presentation. Now it's not in my eye anymore. Okay, I have a quick quote too, just from Jessica Gordon-Nimhard before we start talking about the marketing itself. If you all are not familiar with the work of Jessica Gordon-Nimhard, she is a professor at CUNY and she is the author of Collective Courage, A History of African-American Cooperative Economic Thought. She wrote in this book a quote there, please, you all should just check this book out if you're interested. It's really, really good. She writes, people in every country and throughout history have used cooperative economics as a development strategy. Cooperatives, particularly worker-owned cooperative businesses, are examples of democratic economic institutions that provide a mechanism for pooling resources, increasing benefits, and sharing profits. I have
Yeah.
See? You guys are like, we don't already know about that. That's so awesome. Okay, I don't even, we can skip that, but that's crazy. You guys are already. Oh, hi. Somebody is raising their hand. This is crazy. This is different. Okay. So the person raising your hand, hi, Andrea, am I saying your name correctly or is it Andrea?
Hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. What's up?
Way to make it a little clearer because it's muffled for us, the background. When they're talking, I hear just muffled. I don't hear clearly what they're saying. Is there any way to make, I don't know, with the microphone so we can hear what everyone's saying in the background? We hear you, I hear you clearly, but when
That's a good question.
I can't hear them very well.
What they did last week is the presenter kind of repeated it.
Oh,
so that
okay.
they could hear that since we're not.
Cool. And I can do that.
move this slide up in the corner? Oh, yeah, the volume can look a little bit more.
Oh, okay.
That's true.
That's- Farther goes.
Okay. So the
Yeah.
mic is as loud as we can get it. And what we will try to do is repeat what other people have said so that you guys can know as well. I'm sorry if it gets a little too involved too, just because by nature of this presentation, I like it to be this way. It just is interactive. So if you all miss out on stuff, I'll try to keep up. We have some comments. I feel like for any generation up to and including millennials, when coming up, co-ops were seen as something that rich hippie white people did. See, and that really is just not I don't think it's accurate. It's just, and we organize on a national level and we're always at other co-ops state to state. It's just not true. It's not what I've seen, other than if you're like in Vermont, like sure. What's up?
I was thinking conversation with someone yesterday, and what they said was, we don't always call it a co-op.
Mhm.
And so the word co-op, I think, is new for some folks, but the reality, as we're all discussing, is that this is what our grandparents, our great-grandparents have done and always done. They just didn't call it co-op. And I think when they hear the word co-op, they're thinking that it's something different than what they've always done.
I agree. Co-op got co-opted.
Yeah.
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 I was gonna that is really
That's how they do.
yes, for sure. It's if you all did not hear that, Lynn, okay, was saying that our predecessors were not calling the economic organizations that they were doing cooperatives, even though it was still cooperative economics at root. We have another piece of comment. This is different because people were not responding in the chat yesterday. So now, okay. Thank you guys, everybody. The young people, I'm 27. I'm turning 27 in like 7 days. People say wins in the chat. I don't know. That's like a new thing for me. I was not a streamer when I was a young person. Okay. Hold on 1 second. I think it's the same one. Let's go back. Okay, cool. Next slide. I can't, can we turn this on? All right, cool. All right, so marketing, right? That's why you guys are here. You already know about cooperative economics. So let's talk about it. So something what's up? Yes. To like the bottom corner. Is that good for y'all? Okay, cool. All right. So the why of your co-op is the beginning of marketing. I work with a lot of startup co-op organizers. This is like the foundation that I always try to go off of. Whatever reason that your co-op is beginning to form is the basis on which you want your marketing to go off of. Exactly what we're talking about too. People are not really familiar with what cooperative economics means when we talk about that. You all are familiar with it because you're the organizers, but the people outside of your circle need to understand not only what a co-op is. The more we're having these discussions, the more that it feels dominant in the discourse. And secondly, why you want to begin it. There's some reason why you want to start a store. It's not just because you guys want to hold hands and eat natural foods together. And even as we've discussed too, I'm from a grocery co-op. And clearly, you all are starting co-ops that are not necessarily what I do. There are housing co-ops, electric co-ops. There's a lot of stuff outside of it. It does not matter. The essential reason is the root of all marketing. We are currently the example I have right now, and I know that we're an established store, but it still relates. So when I was making these slides, we were in the next slide, we'll show the images of it. we were in the planning process of starting a member drive for our store. Last year, we got a grant from Historic Maryland to completely do a full remodel of our store. Our building is like 100 years old or something crazy like that. In the summer, we were operating sales out of a wedding tent and refrigerator unit in our parking lot. We didn't have a freezer. So at that time, a lot of our members, including me, because I eat a lot of frozen edamame, popsicles, stuff like that, people were going to other places to shop. Once we got back into our building, we wanted to have a solid plan as to how we were going to recapture shoppers and also attract new people because we had a brand new building. Come check it out and see what it's like. So we ran a member drive. When we were planning the member drive, there are two clear different approaches that we had to marketing. There is our internal why and our external reason why we wanted to attract members. Internally, we wanted a financial bedrock on which we could further operate. We wanted to replenish our money because we had just spent a lot of it doing the remodel outside of doing the grant. our ceiling fell in like during the sun, like just a bunch of our heating broke. Like there was stuff that we had to take care of on the one hand. Externally, what people knew is that we had a Le Creuset that they could win. That was the main point of attraction. Our member owners did not need to know. They could have, because it is a cooperative. If people were curious, we were clearly going to tell people this is the financial reason. This was enough. We did several boosts campaign wise, just in terms of pushing marketing. But the primary we have now, we wanted to get 100 member owners by the end of March, and we're already at 120. 101 is from the last time I updated the slides. It was a really easy push. People just needed something to anchor onto, and even if that thing was quite simple, being able to win a new Dutch oven, that for them was the why. Us having our own internal made it possible for it to be like a fully successful drive. I also will talk about later, I'm a big graphic design lady. I do all of our graphics for the store. Seductive graphic design will go a lot further than just having ideology. It will press, but people need something to look at in the same way they need something to hook into. I feel like I had some kind of, hold on, let's see. Yep. Cool. We're good. All right, so into the marketing essentials. Boom, one. Never assume that the why of your co-op is naturally so attractive that people will be drawn to it. The why of your co-op, you all already know, right? And I will get into the 70-20-10 model. This is like essential to grocery co-ops, but it's also essential to cooperatives as a whole. 70% of the people that you're marketing to are people that understand the need for stronger community institutions, but are not necessarily going to do the work to build them out. We, as an established store, we've been in our community for over 50 years. We work off of this all the time. 70% of people are going to come shop in the store. They admire the work that we do. They would not run for the board if they were asked to run for the board. They would not come to organizing meetings if they were asked to come to organizing meetings. The fact that we exist to them fulfill some kind of void and makes them feel connected to community.
I'm listening. I know exactly what you
It's a real thing, but there are ways also to transfer, and as it says in bold too, your marketing effort should always be to these people, because these people can be changed. From start. They might say to you, I'll never do that kind of work. I'm not interested in organizing people. I don't know anything about organizing people. It might seem that way to people until you make your why attractive enough and are consistent enough in terms of marketing and approach that people start to come in. This is at the end of the slides, but it feels, now that I've done it before, it feels important enough to say, being consistent with marketing will do way more than doing occasional pushes and hoping to get a lot of people. If there's a way that you can make your co-op a standalone institution in the community that people know to be reliable and are consistently putting out messaging, you will attract people. 2 or 3 people is a successful attraction point. 4 people is this. 1 person coming to an organizing event is like the beginning of radicalization to us. When I first started my work, even though my co-op is incredibly successful in X way, we used to be known before me as financially successful and socially weak. We would make a lot of money, but if we had an event, nobody would come. If we wanted people to come hang out with us, that was not going to happen. And that really sucked for me in my job, because I was marketing towards what you all are, the 10% of consumers. 10% of consumers already know about co-ops. They would run for the board if you ask them to run for the board. They know someone else who works in a co-op in another city. They're familiar with the idea. They're into like communist ideology. That kind of stuff is familiar to them. If you're marketing toward these people, you're not going to get that many people because you probably already have those people on your team. Those people are interested in this kind of work, exactly like they're here in this room, right? You are this kind of consumer. Right. When I started doing my work, I would put on our Instagram, you all know there's 7 international cooperative principles like that. I should be able, this is like the, I should be able to name all 7 of them, but I cannot right now. I used to market on our Instagram and post like slideshows, these graphics of nobody cared. That was for me. That's the kind of stuff that a consumer like me would be interested in because I like that kind of work. That is not for the 70% of people that you capture most of the time, just on one little inkling of something. That's what gets them into the store. Then 20% of consumers, and we never want to, this is like, I shouldn't say never, occasionally you will think about it. 20% of consumers are people that would just happen upon your co-op because it's next door to something else that they go to. Their kids go to karate in the building that's next to the building that the co-op is in. marketing toward these people, there isn't really a clear way to market toward these people, so your focus should not even be there. But marketing toward the highly attracted is not going to serve you in the long run. It needs to be broad enough in its messaging and accessible enough that people who know nothing about the industry would find it to be inherently attractive. And we'll talk more about that in the next slides. Okay, cool. Building a community-driven foundation is the basis for a financially successful co-op. The people who are on your organizing teams should be people that are in the community actively. One of the first ways we started doing this kind of work for me, because I was this person, I'm from the Eastern Shore and I went to school in Portland, Oregon. My family, they're all native Washingtonians, so I was like aware of DC and spent a lot of time in DC. I did not have any sort of social connection to the DC area with people my age when I moved to Tacoma Park. That was not, I didn't know anybody. People that recently have moved to a city, recent college graduates, are great because they already have some kind of mission in their heart. They want to do work that feels like it's going to change things. I went to, said this last night, I went to a school whose motto is communism, atheism, free love. I went to Reed College in Portland, Oregon. It's a small private liberal arts school. I really was, really were you? That's, that, are you serious? That is so, wow. I didn't even know that she ever. Yeah, and it's a weird place because I'm from the shore and it's very conservative. Like I really wanted something that felt like the opposite of. It still is, for sure. Like even with the recent Palestine protests, we were protesting against the same kind of stuff when we were freshmen. We were like sleeping in the administration, like that, and nobody was like gassing us out. You know what I mean? Like the way that other schools have handled that to me is completely foreign to how I was educated. Yeah, that's so sick. Thank you for sharing that. Not only recent college students though, because sometimes I feel like in the same way that people market or have the idea of co-ops as probably like hippie white people, using college students can kind of feel like that too, like focusing on that group of people. I make a big point of saying that worship institutions are great to connect with because they have physical space where you can organize, like an actual basement where you can have people come and meet. And secondly, they build trust. So if people in your community know that you're locked in with a worship organization, it makes you seem like you're not just a group of people hanging out for some purpose. An established community organization, and I have this in the lower point, I can move this also to the side so you all can see. There's never any shame in needing to work with others to market, especially when you're in your startup phase. I am not a nonprofit lady. I have had a hard time with nonprofits my whole life. When I graduated from college, I knew that I didn't want to work for a nonprofit making money for a CEO who makes way more than everybody else and supposedly we're doing ethical work. That just didn't really fit with what my idea of success looked like with my metrics. But our local nonprofits have been one of the biggest reasons we've been successful because they're tapped into the community. Right? What? This is crazy. Yep. Was like I felt like I brought that to Baltimore for real. I took it with me up for That's true. We do. We do. It hasn't rained like longer than a day in a minute. That's true. And it's growing season too. Also, happy spring equinox, you all. We're day one. It's crazy to be here. As you all, I'm an Aries, so this is like a big deal to me. The start of my season.
Right. Every season.
I know, day one. The last two seasons are not my favorite, so it's a good transition for me. Yeah. Anyway, so our nonprofits have been one of the easiest ways that we've connected with people that were not necessarily co-op people. There are people that are like in the food system space who work for local nonprofits that don't know anything about what a cooperative organization does, that through their community support and our nonprofits I rock with, and not all, through their ability to be pillars in the community, we therefore seem more trustworthy because of our connections with them. So if a local nonprofit has a newsletter, I always use that as a way to start asking about advertising stuff. If you all have a readership of over 20,000 people in your newsletter, please let us put in an ad for our organizing committee. We want to attract people. And you're going to get people in those circles who are not conventional co-op organizers. Your goal in your marketing should always be to attract people who are not necessarily the people that you would associate with whatever stereotype that is with a co-op. That's like, it's very easy to get people who are like, and you all are those people who are attracted to the 70-20-10, to get people who are attracted to the idea of co-ops. The marketing should always be to get people who have nothing to do with that and are just going to be interested in the community initiative that is for the people and by the people. These are an example, we have two of collaborations that I feel really proud of. So we did a co-op film festival last summer when we were doing the remodel because we did not have physical space. So I wanted to remind people that we existed. Rhizome DC is a DIY art space that is in Tacoma, DC. They have a kitchen, they have a the pull down version of this, the old school version of this, that you can screen things on. We advertise this one through Rhizome's newsletter. They have a completely different readership than our newsletter does. Those are people who are interested in like noise music because they do a lot of noise shows. They do clown shows, stuff like that. A completely different audience, and they have like 15,000 readers on their newsletter. For each of these screenings, we had over 60 people at each one. And none of those people knew anything about the work that we did. None of those people were people that were, and I assumed when we were putting this programming on that I was going to get a lot of the people that come to our board meetings had nothing to do with that. So having people doing connections in spaces that feel, qu'est-ce que c'est, how could I put this? Associated to the work that you do, clearly, like nonprofits that you agree with, but still have a completely different audience is really helpful for getting people who can build startup energy. I also, once again, a beautiful graphic will carry things really far. I'm a wheat paster. You all know what that is? Yeah, it's an old school thing. Yeah.
Is that the same?
Yeah. Yep. That really, because, and perhaps it feels old school. That's true. You could do it that way too. Do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very similar. For us, it's a big thing in Tacoma Park. People advertise things that way, and I pay attention. I walk a lot. That's like my big thing. I see stuff that way. Those are advertisements to me. So we wheat pasted these like everywhere in the city. And I also put them, my mom is a librarian. She works at the Petworth Library. So it's like I was putting stuff down there too. Pin boards, this is a thing that I should put in there are pin boards everywhere in every city. You're just not really paying attention to that. And perhaps you are paying attention. I don't know. Those have been actually the bigger advertising spaces to me than just email newsletters. Because even then, the people that sign up for an email newsletter are very different than the people that are just walking around the street looking at things. Paying attention to all forms of advertising that are not just this, because it's very easy to get caught up as a marketer in this day and age on just doing things here. Social media marketing here. We're advertising things on Instagram, on Twitter, and on email. Only certain people, and honestly, a very specific age range are in that group. But we'll talk about that more as well. I have more thoughts on that too. And this is another one that we just started. We have just begun a co-op book club with our local bookstore, People's Book. This is a book written by a local author, Catherine Miller, and she made it so, just by request, that we have the PDF for free for people who want to join the book club. And if people want to buy the book, it's 15% off at People's Book if you register. A lot of our members who are not, this is for us specifically, we have a lot of members who are interested in becoming more involved in the community, but they don't want to run for the board. Because board work you don't actually have to know anything truly. Well, you get educated in the process of it, but it requires more of a time commitment. And a lot of people, especially, I've noticed this. I don't know if you guys have this problem in Baltimore, but in DC, people are they're lonely, very isolated. Yeah, I think it's hard to build community. People make it seem as though when you're after a certain age, it's just hard. Like I'm an incredibly extroverted person. It was very hard for me to like build friends in my area, and it's a very hip, liberal, whatever the hell that means. Building out structures for people with your co-op that feel that feel associated with the work, but feel like they're leaning more so on building connections between people, also fall into the category of building trust with your organization and the community. This organization is aiming to do X, but at the same time, they're creating spaces and pockets for people to meet with each other and create connection. So this is one of the things that we started to do, and our first meeting is in April. We've already had like 10 people sign up for this and have purchased the book, and it also brought money into our local economy because we're bringing to People's, which is not a corporately owned bookstore, it's locally owned. Oh no. No, that'd be great. Like, why would, and what my GM Austin says too, like, if we were charging for stuff, like, what are we gonna do with that money? Like, we made $5 off, like, what is that gonna go? Who is that benefiting? All right, cool. This is my favorite slide. So you're familiar with it. Do you all know what that means? Dirty macking, familiar? No? Okay. So dirty macking is like if some guy was taking you on a date and another guy that was interested in you saw you going on this date and he was like, he took you to Papa John's pizzeria and he got you one pizza, but I would take you to Pizza Hut and get you like 20 pieces. Like he does like nothing for you. And it's not even just like, oh, he likes you and he's saying like, I want to go out with you. It's like what the other person does for you is like shit. And I could do like way better than that. We have been doing this a lot more recently. What are the other businesses in your area doing that have actively caused harm to people in the community within what you're trying to do? So whatever co-op you're trying to start up, whatever the paralleling business is in your community, how is that? So for us, it's a very clear, right? We're a grocery co-op. Corporate grocery is just like it's not even just for Black people, it's for like the American consumer. Corporate grocery is taking a lot more from you than you would even know. Now, our problem in the DC area, you guys have a Mom's though. You have the one in Hampton, and it's got that, oh my God, it's got that good. There's one in Timon. Oh, I know yep. I was going to when I first got my license, I would drive up. Anyway, yes, I'm familiar. Yeah. This is tough for me because the Mom's has that good food thing. What's it called? Slow food. It's got that food bar in there. You can like order prepared foods and that food is good too. Like they got a sweet potato with pineapple on it. That thing is a certified banger. It's very tasty. So if you all don't know, I should have included, I could update it on here too. No, they're not. One, they're not. So they had a successful union campaign and they're now UFCW, United Food and Commercial Workers at the College Park location. The College Park Union won a $100,000 lawsuit against them in February for union busting. Like a full blown campaign. So not only did we find this out, this is public knowledge and public news, but Donut Run, which is a locally owned business in my community, it's right next to the Tacoma Park Metro Station. Their entire staff is made up of people that were fired from the College Park Moms for union organizing, their whole staff. We only found that out through, I go in Donut Run because I like donuts. So just in conversation with people who work in that store, it became clear to me, one person said that to me, that they had been fired. Another person said that to me. The third person that said that to me was like our whole staff. We have not, and we talked about this yesterday too, we have not been marketing in that direction because we don't want to get Donut Run in the crossfires of grocery business. But the union business that's a clear cut. We're international workers of the world. We've been unionized for a while, making a clear distinction between the work that we do and the work that Moms, which is a parallel business to us. It is locally, they now have like 50 grocery stores on the East Coast or something like that, but they started out in Maryland. I think the College Park one was the first one. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not sure. But that is they just put a new one in Silver Spring at the same time that we were doing our remodel. So we were like, okay, when we back open, if there was a way that we could do some kind of collaboration with them and we felt like they were an ethical business, sure. But their business practices have not been sound and we want to attract people into our store. Therefore, it was really easy for us to start marketing in the direction of saying, these people don't do X for you and we do Y.
I got you.
Serious, it's a huge systematic differentiation. All right. And now we're gonna get into the meat of it. So I've done this in a couple different layers. What level of operation is your co-op currently sustained at, and how do you begin directly marketing? So boom, one, I want to start a co-op, but I don't know anyone else who would be interested. What's up? Oh, in the chat. W's in the chat. W's in the chat. All right. Hello, guys. They are in Philly too. Yeah, they do have a couple moms in Philly. We were up there recently and we noticed the same thing. I can see why you're used to a different idea of co-ops and what we came up with in the city, though. Yoshi, can you say more about that? Because if it's Baltimore specific, that's something I actually am really curious about. If you guys I've said to my GM a million times, if there was a co-op in Baltimore, I would be up, bro. I would be here.
So-
I like Baltimore
So I'm
much.
not in Baltimore. We're coming out of Philly. So
Okay.
I was just talking talking about your educational and personal background. I've spent some time on the West Coast and things are incredibly different. So in my past comment, I was speaking more on my experience in Philly. That was the perception is that co-ops were for white hippies. Now me and my mom went, but that doesn't change what the perception was because that's who was in there. Luckily
Mm.
things have changed a lot, but definitely coming up, that was the perception for sure. So I could see
Can I-
how, coming up predominantly on the West Coast, like I spent 10 years there, there's a lot of different views. But coming up in Philly, that was the perception.
Can I ask, because I know that Philly has like a fairly successful Weaver's Way has a big presence in Philly for sure, because they have like three or
Mhm.
four locations. And then
Right.
also I've heard some not so great things about Mariposa. Thank you very much. I'm fasting. I'm a Muslim. So I have like we have like what 20 minutes though. I can have some water in like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
7:20 specifically. I'm sorry if you didn't see I was given a water bottle. You're like, why are you saying that? That had nothing to do with what we were talking about. What currently living in Philly, what is your perception of the way that Black people are interacting with, or just generally speaking, non-white people are interacting with the co-ops in that city?
So I could let somebody else speak to it. I haven't lived there, like I said, 10 years. I've been in Cali for 10 years, but
Oh, now. Okay.
I said specifically, um, generations before and leading up to millennials growing up, the perception was that cooperatives were, like I said, for people that could afford it. They were only put in neighborhoods that had access to it, which was not our neighborhoods. They were often placed in the predominantly white, affluent neighborhoods. So any black person that could go was also rich. You know what I mean? Me and my mom, we used to drive out to Weaver's Way. And so now they do, from what I understand, they have more locations that are more accessible.
Yeah.
But I think back when 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 you were talking about it, I was just speaking to growing up, how it was, and I can see a difference being made, like I said, but they also don't have a location in West Philly. They don't have a location in South Philly. They don't have one in North Philly. They still only have them in areas, and I feel like the spread of their co-ops are only spreading with gentrification. So
Yeah.
while neighborhood may have always been predominantly black or historically black, while they're growing there, it seems like, when I hear about a new location is where gentrification is happening, is where they feel like their customer base is. So while the black people in those neighborhoods have greater access to it, I don't think that's their intended purpose.
That's a really see
Good point, Yoshi, good point.
and I wonder you're giving me I have a million thoughts for you because our store is thinking about doing a second store expansion next year, which is like right now a pipe dream because it's like we need to get our money right after remodeling, but the board is really like we should do a second store expansion. The question, where we would put that in the city because we're already in Tacoma Park is like pretty diverse. It's like mad Ethiopians, like mad Black people, like there is the question of like, oh, and we talked about this last night too, that Trader Joe's tends to do the same kind of expansion. That Trader
Mhm.
Joe's, it used to be that it seems like it was only for white people. And now it's like they'll put a Trader Joe's in an area that they think is like urbanly developing, which is exactly
Well,
what
I mean, a Trader Joe's and a co-op are signs of gentrification, just like a Starbucks and a white lady walking a dog down the street.
I see. I disagree with the co-op being that
Hey,
though, because
but the point I was making was that you growing up on the West Coast, I could see why you don't see it that way because you didn't grow up seeing the exact signs that we've seen. You get what I'm saying? Like those are the signs. Like if I grew up in a neighborhood and never once in my life saw a Starbucks or a white lady walking a dog down the street, but then, they put out some kind of a development block grant and people are putting up developments. Now there's a Starbucks. Now the lady that lives in the new housing is going to walk down to the Starbucks. Now, our home prices and taxes you see what I'm saying? It's kind of cyclical. And although co-ops, you know, now this is us here trying to do better. Co-ops still essentially kind of follow that. Weaver's Way is a perfect example. They have that when I was growing up, they had that one location, and I think I overheard them saying that they have maybe three. But thinking about the locations where they describe they're at, they're not, you know, in the hood. They're in the areas that are being gentrified. They're in those commercial corridors that are being revitalized. So I can promise you there's probably a Jamba Juice somewhere near there, or like a coffee shop. You get what I'm saying? So if the co-op follows the trend of the capitalist organized, corporation, what is it doing differently besides its ownership structure? But then the people that own it are just the people that are gentrifying that neighborhood.
I have, first of all, I did not grow up on the West Coast. Thank you very much. I grew up in the cut in Maryland in the country. I just
Right,
went
you
to
for
school.
sure. Yeah, I'm in Norfolk
Yeah.
right now, so I'm a little
Are you
familiar with that.
seriously? Okay,
Yeah.
that's it's similar to how okay, cool. I think part of it is like the responsibility of where the co-op is where the organizing committee chooses to, and that is where it feels like there's a huge difference. Whoever in whatever community you're in across the United States, if you choose to come together and build a grocery store,
Mhm.
that's the reason that we're here. If you all want to
Right.
build out a co-op, you can put it wherever the hell you want. And if people
Mhm.
are choosing, the organizing committee of Weaver's Way is choosing to expand in that way. That's their
Mhm.
mission, that's their prerogative. In a completely different universe, in Minneapolis, most of those co-ops are primarily run by Ethiopians, which is very random.
Mhm.
And they choose to put themselves, most of the co-ops in Minneapolis and in St. Paul are not in the white parts of Minneapolis or in St. Paul. They're
Mhm.
where the organizing committee started up. I think most co-ops, the reason that we have this perception of them as white, hippified, are the people that had the initiative and also had
Mhm.
connections with people that had larger amounts of money who could do the funding and could
Right.
be larger stakeholders. Those are the people who are choosing to put things in the places in the neighborhoods where they are now. It's
Yeah.
our job as Black co-op organizers to build out co-ops and put them in the places where they would be most valuable to us. Because the
Yeah.
system, because it's anti-corporate, is by us. It's our choice about how we're going to do it. I don't.
Yeah.
Can I jump in?
Yeah,
I
my
agree.
comments just real quick. My comments were just in response to, you're like, that just hasn't been my experience. So I just wanted to explain my
Sure,
experience from where I'm from.
for
That was
sure.
the representation we had.
Yeah, and I think you can add to it. I'm from Philadelphia, and I'm gonna say you're right. It's who the founding members wanted, where you wanted to be. In our experience in Philadelphia, we're a city of neighborhoods. We didn't have, I don't think we had the access to the distribution. We didn't have the knowledge. It wasn't open to us and it wasn't directed towards us. So yeah, it was in areas where people had the money to do it and they put it where they wanted it, where they lived. So it wasn't, the focus was not to let's change the, African American community. No, they put it in, was our area is Chestnut Hill, which is the affluent section of Philadelphia. And the founding members, I'm sure, was completely white, and it probably still is. But now, because Philadelphia is making a change, they have a lot of community gardens, which are community, they're started in communities of blacks. So now they are opening up to, well, let's see, they're moving now, let's move where they are. But that's the different movement. It wasn't started for that reason. Years that they've been around for years, but they've never marketed to a black community, which we have a number of black communities. But now that the black community is coming together, they seem to be now moving in those directions to get on board. So I see what you're saying, but I think Philadelphia may be a different, we are a neighborhood, so we are kind of with our own culture, more or less. And no, they were not marketing to us for years, but now because the different communities of blacks are actually moving forward with this
Now
kind
we're
of
a
movement.
viable consumer.
Right. So now they're like, well, let's be open. But I'm gonna say I don't know their board, but I would not be surprised if whoever that it's still at the top white. And that's the issue.
Yeah.
We don't have access, and we are not included in that decision making.
Yeah, that was just me sharing my experience. I think I said something in the chat, and you were like, "I just disagree," and I'm like, "Well, I can only speak to my experience, so I thought I'd share a little bit more." And I felt like getting a little more background about where you came up and organizing was helpful.
For sure. And thank you for because we just did the discourse for real. Like now I have a bunch of
That's why I'm here.
and we could do a whole separate, right? We need to do like a breakout room because And I also, the way that DC is organized and the way that Baltimore are organized are very different in terms of the way, like in terms of spread and development. So what would develop here would be so different than the way that we're, and even when I was organizing before, we were talking about this earlier. When I was organizing before last year and asking why there wasn't a co-op in Baltimore, people were kind of offended when I asked that. Like it was a very tender topic to people. I think because I think of a co-op because I'm from an established co-op as just like a thing that it just comes up. People are gonna organize, they're gonna put a storefront together, you're gonna start a buying club, we're gonna start it up. And I think people were like, it's way more racially segregated in this city than it is in my city. And it's a lot more, DC has a larger mix of upwardly mobile people of color. Yes, for sure. For sure. That's like the past like 25 years. Yeah. Because my parents are native Washingtonians. They both come from really very poor families. Like it had nothing. Their friends of their family were not like, that's a whole different class. Yeah. That has been recently created. Yep.
In housing, in food.
Primarily in housing too. Yeah.
Yeah.
There is a co-op.
If I had to say, people. Oh, I'm sorry. Somebody in the room still talking.
Yep. No, go ahead.
There's a Hagerstown co-op market.
Oh, yeah, that's in Baltimore County.
Yeah, they're visiting us tomorrow, actually. If you all would like to go. Serious.
Yeah, that's.
And is there one in Cherry Hill? So Cherry Hill?
No.
Co-op?
No,
Okay.
they were starting.
Okay, but it never got really off the ground.
Yeah.
Oh.
It was starting, but they.
I know about.
Okay. That's Baltimore County. I can't believe when I put in co-ops, moms comes up.
Yeah, Moms, that was the first, I did the same thing. Moms was the first, it is not a co-op.
Don't get me started on this because they do a lot of marketing that tries to make it seem as though they have something to do with that kind of work, and it has nothing to do with that kind of work. Okay, do we have final thoughts before we continue? Yeah, I was gonna say, Yoshi, was that you or was it somebody else?
What?
I feel like did you have something else to say?
No, I was just saying, like, I feel like for our collective and for me personally, like, I think Philly and Baltimore have always been kind of intrinsically like intertwined, especially in the ways that the Black people, like how would you call it? The division of race and class, the way the cities were built. And so I think you talking about trying to figure out where to expand, like that's an interesting question because I feel like economically the Black people of Baltimore have never really had the same type of opportunities, like because the same kind of companies don't come in and build, but they've been socially as engaged or more engaged than Philly and DC for in the longevity. You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Like Baltimore has always been in the work organizing, but I feel like both DC and Philly had so much Black genius being put into being upwardly mobile in the capitalist structure. And it took
For
that
sure.
next generation to come around and say, hey, that was cool, but what about the community? But Baltimore, I feel like they stayed very community centered as much as they could with all the city struggles. But yeah, interested to keep learning. But thank you.
I think Baltimore, DC and Philly too, I'm learning, have a much more entrepreneurial bent. More so than Baltimore. That's always been much like you got more entrepreneurs in DC or entrepreneurs. It's people starting businesses. So it was a sort of, to me, going to Bowie and kind of just interacting with them. It was a mentality of we're gonna have our own in DC. And we're gonna have our own in Philly.
Well, also it's leadership.
It was the leadership. Marion Barry. That's right. Because he made sure
that is true.
That made a big difference. You're absolutely right. Yeah.
But I think something, and Yoshi, I'm so glad that you made those points earlier because when you were talking, when you brought up that gentrification angle, I can certainly relate to that from the Baltimore perspective. So absolutely. But I think one thing that we leave out of the picture too is in terms of the nonprofit development,
Yeah.
particularly here in Baltimore. You see most of your leadership for a lot of the community-based nonprofits, the neighborhood associations are run by Black folks, and they have that social entrepreneurism, not
Mhm.
traditional entrepreneur,
Yeah.
entrepreneurism.
Definitely.
So I think you have to take that into consideration as well
Mhm.
in terms of growing out Baltimore, that you have both that social
Right.
entrepreneur, you don't have to agree with me, but you have both of that. Entrepreneur, because I'm just thinking
That was
about
exactly the
gatekeepers.
point that I made.
Yeah, for me.
That was they maintain their social capital, I feel
Yeah.
like, longer in a more robust way than the other cities maintained, while, like they said, entrepreneurial in the capitalist sense, yes. DC and Philly, I feel like, yeah, but I feel like in the long term, Baltimore has maintained their ability to organize within themselves.
Yeah.
I don't know how to describe that. It's something I've been thinking about a lot. And I'm trying to, but I think you put that together really well. Um, and I feel like expanding into Baltimore, the only first step would be to connect with those organizations and get what are the streets saying? What are the barbershops saying? Is like, find out
Gatekeepers.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Baltimore definitely has those.
Yeah.
not why don't you have a co-op? What would you want from a co-op? You know what I'm saying? Do you even want a co-op grocery store? Maybe they don't have one because they don't feel like they want one. Maybe they feel like they have other issues at hand that are more pressing than a co-op. So to
But I
start with, why
see, and I don't even
maybe?
I have like a million things
Oh,
to do because we talked about this a little bit last night that sometimes it feels like DC has a lot more money, partly because like the HBCU class of DC with Howard at the front line of it has been very directly individually capitalistic. Like the idea of building individual wealth for yourself in DC as a Black person is a really big deal, which is why I feel like, and this isn't even just I understand that people like young people are isolated, whatever, but I do feel like young people in DC are more socially isolated than in Baltimore. That's been my direct experience. And I'm not even from here, but the way that people hang out here and organize with each other, exactly what you're saying, Lynn, in terms of the way that like community entrepreneurship is a real thing, that is not a thing in my city at all. Like the way that nonprofits operate in my city, it's not that way at all. We have some commentary in the chat. Hmm.
30 years ago. And this is when gentrification really started to take off under Anthony Williams. Up to that point, there were Black-led nonprofits in DC with intelligent leadership at the helm. And so when DC went into bankruptcy and receivership, and Anthony Williams went from the receiver to the mayor, then you saw the transformation of DC into what it is now. He made a pledge.
City filed bankruptcy?
Yeah. DC was
Oh,
in
Lord.
receivership. All of it. All of it. And so,
Right.
yeah. And so he made a pledge to bring 10,000 new homeowners into DC.
Wow.
Not supporting the homeowners or the residents who were there.
Yeah.
He made a pledge to bring 10,000. And that has been the pathway from Anthony Williams to Fenty to Sheriff
Fourth.
Pratt.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, it's been a pathway. So everyone has said, and you look at DC now, you see it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Events,
Yeah.
small units,
Yeah.
lack of home ownership, encouragement.
Yeah.
Even the DC down payment assistance program is not operating because of the fact that what they give is well below what is needed in terms of purchasing.
Yeah.
So, but I want to just think about Baltimore. Baltimore's gone through a transition as well. Because when I was doing work in Baltimore back in the 80s, there were probably 30 Black-led CDCs in Baltimore.
What is it?
Community development.
Community development.
Unit development.
And so now, shoot, it's probably maybe 5 or 6.
Wow.
And that was throughout the city, in every neighborhood.
Why is that?
Well, a part of it was again, the lack of vision from leadership in Baltimore,
Okay,
from my standpoint.
I can see that.
Yeah, and it happened under Kurt's foot.
So much happened.
Yeah,
Wow.
so,
I think, I would argue that it happened under the mayor that came after Kurt.
no, they weren't, no, they happened under Kurt's foot. I was there working, and you were there working. And
I was a
saw
little
that.
girl. I was a little girl.
Kurt's foot came into existence. Right. Yeah, and you were on for a few years behind because I remember you 4 years.
That was my young years.
Wow.
And it was a big focus on. Yeah. And I said, Winchester is a disarray.
No, it's a disarray.
Because there was no vision about housing and community economic development.
Yeah.
There was no thrust to build businesses along with housing.
Right.
It was just housing.
It was just housing.
It was just houses. And it wasn't well constructed. But that's a whole other thing.
About that big fire that just
Oh.
I heard something in the news, they took out the whole block. That's probably why they
Oh,
was talking about. They were talking about all the vacant houses on the news.
Well, in my opinion, I think somebody lit that fire.
That's what I'm
And
saying.
you know why I think somebody lit that fire? Because the next block they're developing that school. And when you ride up the street, that it now leaves it open for them to not only develop that block there, but what's next to them.
And get it in.
Just-
Get it for free.
That's, where is this? Like what part of the
It's
city?
the 22 block of Fulton Street.
Yeah.
It's right
Okay.
at, yeah, it's right at the, what's that, Fulton, Pennsylvania, is that? Or is it
Oh.
Fulton, Rice County?
Yeah.
Yeah, it kind of intersects
Yeah.
right there.
So it's above no fence.
No, above no fact. About across from the
Where they convert.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a funeral home kind of caterpillar.
Yeah. I mean, exactly what you're talking about.
I have to look it up.
Grounds, okay.
Sorry.
No.
One line.
Yeah, sorry. I'm not even sorry though. We doing the discourse for real. Okay. You're just, yes.
Yeah,
That's super, yeah, that's really apt. And it takes a combination of both to have a store anyway, or to even, let's not even say a store, to build a cooperative enterprise from the start. Like both are completely necessary. Yeah. All right, you guys. I don't even remember where we were. Let's jump back in. I'm gonna minimize the messages and I'm gonna move this to here. We good? Can everybody see? Okay, cool. We talked a little bit about buying clubs last night, so I just want to put some emphasis on this if you guys are not familiar. If you are familiar, then we don't need to talk about it very much. Most co-ops of my kind, I am from a consumer cooperative, which means that we are owned by our members. We are not worker owned, which would be nice, but that is not our current situation. Most consumer cooperatives start out as buying clubs, which means you, with a group of people, you form an LLC together. You get like 20 people in your neighborhood, you form a business. With that business, you buy from a large natural foods retailer and you buy things wholesale. So then when you receive the product, you then split it up with the people that are members of your business. And that way you get the food for a lot cheaper than what you would get if you were to buy your groceries by yourself. Now, what that typically does is it builds community feeling. People start getting into the idea of the cooperative because you're already doing that kind of business anyway. If people are not, if you want to start a co-op but don't know how to actually start marketing it toward people, I would actually start with just marketing the idea of a buying club first. If you're doing a grocery co-op like we are, and also if you're doing any kind of purchasing co-op, that tends to be a really successful model first. What I've seen fail with a lot of co-op organizers is they want a storefront really bad. They want a building, they want to put something in it really fast. that it takes a long time to build out a co-op. It can take anywhere from 2 to 5 years. If you have really good organizers and you have really strong financial backing, it can be a lot faster than that. But starting out people with an idea of something that can be achieved tends to be a lot more successful than telling people an idea of what is truly for you still like a dream or a fantasy in the future. Yay. Okay, level 2. I'm having conversations with people, but I don't feel like the ideas are going anywhere. You're talking to people in your community, you're you're pushing the idea out, and it doesn't feel like people are interacting with it really well. Start having meetings. This is like, I think people are sometimes shy to have a formal meeting. Like, you know, a couple of people that would be really interested in doing the work, but you don't want to get people together. As is outlined in the presentation, time is the most valuable resource that anybody has to give toward your organization. If people take time out of their day as a worker, as a mom, as a father, as a caretaker, to give time to the co-op, that's a real big deal. Formal meetings with at least one other person and the people in your organizing community are a success. I'll talk about this later too. Don't aim to sell anyone on any idea. Just make it a meeting where you're starting out with the idea of your co-op in the forefront, exactly as we just did. Let the conversation flow into whatever it naturally flows into. This is once again building community trust. It makes people feel connected to the organization. And the more that you center these kind of spaces, the more successful the idea of the co-op will be. Also feed people. Feed people and find childcare. If there's a way that you can take care of people's kids at the time of the event is happening and make sure it's a full meal, not like granola bars and like water. Like, so people know that if they come, they're going to be taken care of, their family's going to be taken care of, and they'll be satiated after you leave. That is like fundamental also Black Panther organizing. We take care of people at a really fundamental level, so then they feel able to engage with the higher ideological work that we're doing. Same thing I said before in terms of publicizing things and presences and spaces that already have a network. Us hosting stuff, we use Rhizome for things outside of the Co-op Film Festival. When we were having our last fall member meeting, we had it at Rhizome. It's really nice to have things in spaces where we're getting other people from different spaces. And I know I've said it before, but it just feels important. Just marketing to people that would be interested in the work is not going to be successful. You need to get people from outside of the fold. Level 3, is that right? Yeah. We're organized and we have consistent meetings about starting a co-op. We're looking for funding and external structures that will take us to the next level. Most of the time, the reason why co-ops at this stage flounder is because the branding is not solid. The messaging is there. You all have the idea. It's present. And it sounds really lame and silly, but it's simply not. The graphics are not good. The graphics are blurry on Facebook. They're super zoomed in. There are no pictures of actual people organizing together. There needs to be an image to potential stakeholders and also to potential member owners of what the co-op is to be. This does not mean that you have some kind of graphic or blueprint drawn out of what the co-op is supposed to be, but you've taken pictures at all of your meetings and people look happy to be there. This is marketing 101. People look interested in the work that you're doing. That is one of the biggest things that will take it. And oh, ooh, I've completely forgot about this too. So happy when the slides are actually, I did my work for real. So 2 organizations that I always put to people who are trying to start co-ops, the Cooperative Development Fund. This is for everybody, not just food co-ops. CDF has 2 funding cycles in the winter and spring of every single year, and they fund all kinds of co-ops at different stages of development. We got a grant from CDF last year just to do a speaker series at our store. It was really easy. Also, if you need people who are grant writers, my email is at the end of the slide. Grant writing is a fairly, there are plenty of people in this network that do this work. And as principle 6 of co-ops is, co-ops supporting other co-ops, you can ask other co-ops for stuff and they will help really easily. When we were doing our remodel project, we reached out to other co-ops that did remodels. I didn't know anything about marketing through a remodel. I didn't know how we were going to keep shoppers. This is completely new to me. And we just talked to other stores on the front end. When I had to write a grant, I talked to other stores. When I started up doing our social media, the Isla Vista Co-op, which is in Santa Barbara in California, it's associated with the University of Santa Barbara. I really like their social media. I didn't know anybody there. I just emailed them and said, I really like your social media. And we met once a week for like 3 months until I felt like I was good at the work that I was doing. So collaborating with other co-ops and asking them for help is one of the biggest ways that you can find out the things that are specific to your own organization, especially co-ops that do the work that you already do. Food Co-op Alliance. Okay, so my bad. Food Co-op Alliance is another one that I would recommend if you're doing our kind of work. They're incredible. And they also will help you and give connections with other people outside of FCA. Additionally, their organizers came from other co-ops outside of the food co-op space, so they know about a lot of stuff that is not just grocery co-ops. What else? I recently found out from our produce manager that we have been donating like hundreds of pounds of fruit to the University of Maryland Extension for some program, and we weren't publicizing that. That was crazy to me. Any kind of good work that your organization is doing, publicize it. Being humble about it will not work. It'll be really helpful to the people in your community to know that you're doing things for people in your community. I have a slide about this specifically, actually, to Black Panthers that we'll talk about in a little bit. Find different ways to phrase the same idea. It's just natural branding, because you're going to want to have to say it to a bunch of different audiences, and be consistent in enforcing the idea that your project is community development. Sometimes that term hits people the wrong way because people associate it probably with gentrification, like, oh, it's community development. If there is a solid explanation for the work that you're doing, AKA, this is the first slide, branding and your why, associating your why with the idea of lifting up a community or providing consistent supports for a community is deeply beneficial. Even in our work, we've been existing in our community for a very long time and people are really familiar with what we do. We often capture a lot of new member owners because we're really pushing on the fact that our work is for the people and by the people. It's community development. That's level 3. Level 4, we're marketing to our community, but we don't feel like any of our efforts are well responded to. This is my bag. This is the first year of working. I don't know if I've been in my job now for it'll be 4 years in May. When I first started at my job, I did not know how we were supposed to interact with people. I didn't come from co-ops. It was completely new to me. I had done some community organizing before I worked in my co-op. I was a bartender at an organic restaurant. I had a degree and I knew some stuff about natural foods, and I knew I just really wanted to do the work, and I know that they hired me on a wing and a prayer that I was going to pull it together. So I really felt the push and the pressure to actually start organizing people, and I did not know how to start doing that. It is really plain and simple. If you're doing stuff and people are not coming out, you have to change your strategy. The strategy is not working. There's something else that you should be doing in a different direction that you should be pushing in order to get people. When I first started organizing, I would do like, we're gonna do a yogurt tasting, you know what I mean? And I would expect people to just come and show up for the yogurt tasting. That was not enough. People were gonna come to the yogurt tasting, they were gonna try the yogurt. But what I was actually looking to do, which is to build community with like-minded people and get them to get the message, it was not gonna engender support. You also need to be really, really familiar with what the barriers are in your community to connection. In my community, I'm super aware of the fact that we have a lot of families, and most of the people who live within 5 to 10 square miles of my store this is not a joke, most of them are lawyers or work for the federal government in some way, and they're on like 4 other boards. So their interest in supporting what is already a really successful enterprise is pretty low. Getting people to show up for the co-op in that way, I did not know that when I first started my work, because I'm the 10% of co-op organizers. I just thought that everybody was going to be hopped up on the idea of cooperative economics and everybody was going to want to come and hang out. That was not true. I had to get in the community outside of that and start asking people. Someone asked last night, and this was a really productive question. She was like, how did you start asking people? And because I have a store, in my store, I would just ask. I would be in the front at our customer service desk. Did you see the things that we were advertising? If they said yes, why didn't you come? Why wasn't it interesting to you? There is a reason that you didn't. If that event was going to draw you in, you would have come out and shown out to it. And a lot of people would say that they did not have enough time and that they thought that the co-op was so successful on its own that it didn't need additional supports. We're marketing toward the wrong people. I'm marketing toward people who are already set there. Those are the 70. They're already satisfied with the work that we do. How can I get those people to turn into people that would be actively involved in our organization, changing the programming, changing where it's held, changing the topic of the programming, and also changing the pull and the force. If I'm just pulling people there because I want to make friends, which was really like, I was new to my city, I didn't know anything about anything, that was not the right reason to be organizing. Yeah. Once again, reaching out to other co-ops that do similar work to yours and asking how they operate. Glut is our neighboring co-op. I don't know if you guys know about them. They're in Mount Rainier. They're like, which is also they're on the DC line in a very similar way to us, where they're in Maryland, but DC is like right here. Glut also has a real issue in terms of organizing socially, where people come to the store because they have a storefront and people are really engaged, but people are not coming out to events. They started having broader events, music festivals, When they would start hosting musicians and people were coming out, and then they would learn on the back end, oh, that was the co-op, then people felt more engaged with the co-op as a social structure outside of trying to pull people in directly. We love cooperative economics, come hang out with us. That was not working for them and it wasn't working for us either. We have comments in the chat. You guys are so interactive. This is crazy. Okay. Yes, I do. Thank you I do a little grant writing time to time. It's just a little something for me. There's a QR in the post picture. Yeah, that was for the book club. If you guys want to join the book club, you have to be members of the store first. I hate to tell you that. I would let you guys come in though. It's just me on the back end. There's like nothing else preventing that. What's up?
Information about our event, but I sent it out. They should have received it like
Okay.
this week. I sent it out via email.
Cool. Also, if you guys want, and I said this at the end of the presentation last night, if you all have events that you want to promote, our newsletter gets read by over like 7,000 people. And I do all the it's like it's like sexy and beautiful. Send stuff to me because I'll put stuff in the newsletter for show. Where are we at? No. Okay, cool. So these are what I've identified to be the phases of cooperative development. I believe this is 6 of them. These are one of the best ways to just start thinking about where you are is to identify at what micro level you're engaging with the people that you're trying to get to join your cooperative. One is identifying the opportunity. What is the window in which you could build out a co-op? When would be the best time to do it? And what is your why? 2, building consensus on the potential for a cooperative amongst people in the community. 3, developing trust among potential members. We'll talk about this later in this slide. 4, securing member commitment, which is often a financial investment or a written on investment. Our member drive was a different version of what that is since we already have 4 members, but usually what a member drive is for a startup co-op is getting people to become actual invested members before the enterprise and a physical entity actually exists. 5, involving other stakeholders, bigger organizations like CDF who would do some sort of large investment, NCG, some kind of large investment. And then the last step is starting the co-op. We actually had someone from the DC branch of the Black Panther Party at the meeting last night, so it was really nice to talk with her about this. Let me move this up so you guys can see. When in the phases of development, I think it's just helpful to think about the organizational structure of the Black Panthers because they had very high level ideas of what they were trying to build out for Black people in terms of Black liberation. There is a bunch of I was gonna recommend books, but you all are probably super familiar. There's a bunch of stuff that they had in terms of actual goals that had very little to do with what was going on the ground for the party. So the free food program and Huey Newton had huge issues with this. While they were accruing all these guns and trying to teach people Black like self-sufficiency and protection, the free food program to him almost seemed like too liberal because it didn't have much to do with militaristic tendencies. At the same time, what the free food program did was get people indoctrinated, so to speak, into the Panthers without having them engage at a really high level of ideology. So starting out in a way where people are building trust in the community that has almost little or nothing to do, seemingly, with what your bigger goals are, will help people become more committed to the store or your enterprise in the longer run. As it says in the notes, you could call on the Panthers for support with an abusive partner. They could help you find a job. They would get you a meal. They would help community members get clean off of substances. There are tons of things that they were doing that were connected to further Black liberation that didn't require people sitting down and reading a pamphlet on the Panthers' liberation strategies in order to get them into the system. Would you trust an organization with distinct motives, even if they were community driven, that wasn't supporting the community in other ways? If you had nothing to do with your co-op and someone was trying to build out something, once again, using the phrase community development, and they weren't doing things in the community that didn't have anything to do with their actual one set mission, would you be into them as a community organization? Yay! Okay, this is my jam. Let's talk about it. Co-op social media marketing. What works for every other co-op is not necessarily going to work for yours. When I started at my store, people told me I should not be on Facebook. This was your Facebook is not your audience. It's not necessary. I actually have a lot of member owners of my store, especially because we've been around for like 50 years. The original organizers of my store are still alive, kicking and well, and all of them are on Facebook and all of them are on email. It actually wouldn't have made much sense for us to start marketing in a direction where we were not on Facebook anymore. We would be ignoring a significant part of our what would be the term for this, of our constituency, it would have made more sense. We expanded on Instagram and Twitter because I wanted to get new people in those spaces, but to ignore what I knew about my community would not have made any sense. You all know the way that people are engaging in your community, and if not, just ask. What is the main way that you're interacting with the virtual space? If most of the young people in your community are on TikTok, it could be helpful to get a young person who knows TikTok to do organization work. We don't have many people like that, and we are lucky enough because of the way that Tacoma Park is set up. A lot of our shoppers, their kids shop in the store. So those people are already within the system. Kids come to the store by themselves all the time, teenagers, it's like a normal thing for them. But if we had to reach out to that group, we would do the marketing in that way. Another store cannot tell you, or another cooperative enterprise cannot tell you about your own community. This is why having organizers who know about your own community translates directly into, one, the financial success of your store, and also the success of your marketing efforts. Knowing your community directly translates to social media strategy. Take pictures of everything, every meeting that you have, every organizational committee take pictures of everything. This will lead to the kind of marketing that I talked about in the previous slides in terms of having solid branding that translates further into getting bigger loans and having bigger financial support. Don't be pedagogical on social media. I have learned this the hard way. If people really wanted to learn about Marx or Lenin, they're going to learn about Marx or Lenin. They're not engaging with you because they want you to teach them about really deep ideology. There's a point in time in which that kind of marketing will work, and it's when people are already super, super engaged. But if you're operating as a startup, it can actually distance people from you and make you feel as though you're like a talking head and that they're somehow different than you. The goal of the marketing is always to be as accessible as possible. This is directly from Jessica Gordon-Nimhard. You guys are already reading the book. And we also will share the slides in case you all need it, but different ways of organizing directly, formally, and informally with people that lead to further commitment and community connection. Tactics, I like that word. Yay! Show people why the model is successful. As I just said, the Catonsville Co-op, I wasn't just saying that either. They're coming to visit us, not tomorrow, but on Saturday. Have people that are part of your organizing committee and the people that you're interested in, bring them to other successful co-ops and show them what they look like. We're really lucky in the DMV area that we have a bunch of different co-ops. So there are a bunch of different people that you can ask. We never say no to anyone when they ask us this. We get excited when people ask us to do this. People come to the store all the time. This is what it looks like, a co-op on the ground. If the idea of a co-op, as we were talking about earlier too, if that language is far from people and they don't associate it with a certain thing, it's really helpful to just show this is what it looks like. Tony K. Bambara wrote that the role of the artist is to make the revolution irresistible. You have to make it sexy. It will not work marketing wise if the marketing is not seductive in some way that doesn't get people in the door. The reason I got into co-ops in the first place is because co-ops that I was watching on social media were making the idea seem so interesting that I was like, I probably would like to do that kind of work. If it was not attractive to me in that way, I wouldn't have led into it. These don't work and I should have made them as videos, but do you all know who Steve the Stoner is? No, he does the dance Uptown Downtown. I'm not gonna sing it. No? Okay. Steve the Stoner, he's like a stoner and he does these videos on Instagram where he has a song and he dances to it and young people just really like it. The Milwaukee city government enlisted him to do a voting campaign and 1,500 young people signed up to vote just because of Steve the Stoner's influence. This is just to say that I know in Baltimore, this is probably more true than even in our city. There are people that are interesting to the people of your city that can be really easily enlisted in community development to make it more attractive, and it's never silly. I also bring up Kehlani, the R&B singer in Palestinian resistance. I have a lot of opinions on the ways that she went about this, but I cannot argue with the fact that Kehlani openly supporting being pro-Palestine had an impact on a lot of young people and made them interested in the cause. Does not necessarily mean that it made them advocates for Palestine, but the interest was raised by putting her face in association with the cause. Easy ones. If you're not writing a monthly newsletter, you should be. It's the easiest way to engage with people directly and people come to rely upon it. I read all the monthly newsletters that I get in my inbox because I love them and they keep me connected also as a person who's not from my city originally with things that are going on in the city. So having things in the newsletter that relate to your work and also with the work directly is very helpful. Make it clear that your co-op stands for morals and values that are outside of the work that you're organizing for. We are organizing for X, but we also support birth control, composting, tree building, helpful to people who don't necessarily associate with the work directly, but are like, but I do love tree building, so I'm into that as well. And I said this before, free events with good food, always. It brings people. Some people are just hungry and want to go hang out with people, and then we'll get into the work because of that. Any time, energy, or resources that your organizing committee donates to another organization should be marketed as the story of your co-op. Once again, never being humble about the things that you're doing with other organizations, but publicizing it always. Never be stiff or robotic in your social media strategy. Try different things. If people aren't liking things, try different things. I used to post a lot of graphics heavy on our Instagram, get like 2 or 3 likes. Once we started just taking pictures of people in the store and posting those, our engagement skyrocketed just because we tried out different stuff. Okay, I've talked about most of this, but I want to say this one again because it's important. 3 people coming to an event is a success. That is the people came. I had to learn that myself because 3 people would come to my first events and I would be like, I'm not doing a good job. But those were 3 people who saw my marketing and thought that it was relatable and wanted to come out and organize. So what would successful marketing feel like to your store? Once again, whatever other people's social media strategy is not yours, whatever other people's goals with their organizations are not yours, whatever your organizing committee feels like would be successful to the store is what feels like it would be successful to the store. Fit your goals to the size and mission of your organization currently, not for some fantastical future in which you would want 50 people to show up. This is my essentials. And I say the same thing like 3 times in here because it's really essential. Knowledge of whatever industry you're looking to build a co-op in is equally as essential as passion for the cooperative business model. If you want to build an electric co-op, you should know about how electricity operates in the US on the grid. I know a lot about grocery stores outside of anything that has to do with co-ops. I know the money that Safeway makes. I know Albertsons own Safeway. I know that Albertsons and Kroger failed in a merger last year. All of that stuff directly relates to my ability to be a solid marketer with my people because I need to know what I'm talking about in my industry. To market your store well, you need to know your industry well, no matter what it is. And also, as we get a lot of flack for this, we've had a lot of conversations about this, especially in like socialist conversations. Co-ops are financially successful because they compete in the marketplace like any other business. Business is still at the core of what we do. We're not a nonprofit. We are a for-profit business. We make money. There's no way to get around that. And the only way that we can exist in competition with other businesses is to put that at the forefront of what we do. We're here to make money in our community. That's a fact too. That's true. But the way that it operates with regards to values is a little bit different. For us, it's still, the food industry is cutthroat. And we have to make, not only are we have to meet our bills, we have to pay 50 people on staff, and that's our biggest expense. So see, you're always I should never say anything about nonprofits because of the way that I talk about it for real. I know. All right. These are just kind of basics, and we'll share this as well too. Creating a co-op niche is a big deal with whatever work that you're doing with whatever industry. Who are you marketing to? Who is your primary competition? That's a huge one. People don't think about that even when they're organizing housing co-ops. You have competition, those are developers. Who is it that you're going up against? Because that's the nature of the work that we do in the American business marketplace. What is our buying power in relation to other stores? How can we make it bigger and better? What is specific about what we're doing that is going to get people engaged? It's still the why, but it's the niche out of which you're operating in order to attract more business. This is my final one, I think. Yeah, okay. In the work that I did with Professor Anthony Cook at Georgetown Law when he was organizing, still is, Rosie's Grocery, something that I noticed that was the biggest issue to upward development was that organizers in your city who are already doing the same work, you're supposed to work with them. If they have resistance, people that were on the ground when Professor Cook was organizing did not like the fact that he was backed by Georgetown. Georgetown has a real weird history with people in the city of DC in the same way that Hopkins has a real weird history with people in Baltimore. That was a real tense situation, even though he had the real financial backing of a huge institution to do big work. There's already a grocery co-op on the ground, specifically in Southeast, that felt as though he was bringing in like big brother energy to the work that they were already doing. And the tension between the 2 of them made it really hard for further organization to happen.
Well, in recent years, people like that. The Jesuits who founded Georgetown sold slaves Right off the bat.
Yes, yeah. This was a big deal in the past like 5 or 6 years, and people were really not feeling that. I was not, people were surprised though, and I was like, you're surprised? People were surprised about that, and it was not surprising to me. Yeah, that just felt like kind of like it was like, sure. It wasn't open information.
That's why.
Yeah,
And-
for sure.
And then this thing for the university.
And I think most people, if you're interacting with the idea of the university as somehow like a liberal space, you're already doing, you know what I mean? Like you're already doing it wrong. The university doesn't, no matter where it is, doesn't have good history in terms of engaging with any sort of marginalized population. That being said, I think it made it really hard engaging with these organizers who are already doing this kind of work. It made it really hard to get anything actually productive done because of the resistance. And I think people took it, especially the Georgetown organizers, took it personally that people were not feeling the work that they did. If you cannot collaborate with people that are already doing similar work in the areas that you're doing, it will not be successful. More than likely because those people are going to be necessary to the future success of whatever your endeavor is. Connect with those people. Knowing the history of political movements of the people in your area will deeply inform your current work. What you all were just talking about was news to me. I didn't know much about that, about the history of Baltimore and development. Having people that know about that kind of work on the ground doing will be able to illustrate whatever the future is that you're trying to build out. Creating space for dynamic discourse will win you supporters. This is passive marketing. If people know about the history of food systems in your city and you're the person bringing that, or you and your people are the people bringing that to the people, that brings people into connection with you all as, I like the term gatekeepers, as well, not, not generally speaking, as no, but in terms of being like the keepers of knowledge, if there are people in association with your enterprise that are known to be that, it further deepens and builds out community trust. Oh, for real? Let's talk, you guys. Hold on. Just the 100 emoji, thank you. I appreciate that. And that is all. My Instagram is TPSS Co-op. Our bookkeeper actually did that graphic. I cannot claim to have made that graphic. She marked that out. We were putting that on new t-shirts. I don't know if you all know, but it's really expensive to print t-shirts of more than one color. It'll kill you. And somebody recently said organizations need to stop making t-shirts for real because those are the biggest things in clothing landfills is t-shirts that are like our backyard barbecue for Tracy's birthday. Like those, they just go. Yeah.
Working with a group of the brother who introduced me from DC. They work with something called the Black Led Zero Waste Coalition.
Oh.
And we are every March 30th, and we found out about it kind of late, so we're kind of just doing something to build for next year in 2026. But every March 30th, the United Nations, every March 30th, the United Nations have something called International Day of Zero Waste. And their focus this year is on fashion and the textile industry. And they're saying just what you're saying, that we don't see it as much here in the States, but in other countries, you see a lot of waste with the clothing industry, and even with people who feel like they're doing the right thing by sending clothes over, a lot of that turns into waste. And so we're actually having an event. It's a virtual event on March 30th, from 3 to 5. Send that out to you.
Please, yeah.
But when you said that, I was like, wow, that's right into what the United Nations is focusing around for that Zero Waste Day.
Is that the International Day on March 30th? Okay.
Every year. But I think New York this year is doing it on the Thursday before the 30th for some reason.
That's just good for us to know.
Most people are coming for the 30th.
The 30th.
Yeah, the 30th is.
Okay.
The 30th is a Sunday.
Okay.
One question I have for you.
What's up?
This co-op is predominantly African American, right?
Ours?
Yeah.
No, we're actually like an even split.
Okay.
Like it's like 50% Black people of all like backgrounds, and the other half is like it's mixy because we've run the numbers in terms of being at like it's at least half black. The other percentage is like white people, Asian people. But yes, and we're predominantly black in a sense, especially when you compare us to other co-ops. Like
with, dealing with so many different cultures together. And what types of, because that can't be easy, you know, because
Sure.
they're coming from different points of it. There's another.
Hold on, I'm gonna just put the chat on there so we can see.
I would be interested in hearing that. Slow fashion is a whole
Saying
thing.
this, what?
You said what you said last night.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
what you said last night.
Because exactly what you're asking, we talked about a little bit yesterday. Like I work with a lot of Ethiopians, and what is very clear on the staff of my store, and I work with a lot of like just immigrants, generally speaking, from a bunch of different communities. But I don't know if y'all are familiar with how Silver Spring is in this way. A lot of we have a Ethiopian assistant store manager, and she hired a lot of people from her home country to work in the store. Most of them don't know or care anything about the work that we do. It's just a good job. Like, so when we were doing the member drive, something I really struggled with my GM, because a lot of the cashiers are Ethiopian, I was like, those are going to be the people. It's not me. Like, I'm up on the floor doing stuff all the time. Like, but the people that are interacting with the customers the most are the cashiers. And if you want to join the co-op during this month and you want to ask people, why would I join a co-op? It really frustrates me specifically, because I'm community engagement, that it feels like, and no racism, but it's not a language barrier. Like they speak fluent English. It's not that. It just sometimes feels like, and we talked about this last night too, the African Americans who join the store often are joining because they feel connected to our industry and like really want to join something that uplifts people or just is owned by people. Sometimes it feels with the people who are Black but not American that they're not invested in the work for the same reason. They're just really happy because we pay way above minimum wage and we have really good benefits. I struggle with that in the store all the time. And my coworkers are always very like, we are the world. You know what I mean? Like, we're just so excited that we can tell people at other co-ops that we have a lot of like diverse people. It is tough for me. I'm the only like non-Ethiopian Black woman that works at my job. I didn't really think about stuff like that before I came and worked at my job, especially because I'm from where I'm from. So I was just like excited that it was Black people, but it's a real difference.
It really is.
It's a tremendous difference. There's all, I mean, they be more racist. They be more racist than Asians, real shit, than white people. Like they're very, very anti-Black at like a really fundamental level that will strike you as, and part of that I think is our problem though, because I think we fetishize Ethiopians real bad. And therefore they feel somehow better than us because we're always praising them for looks.
Right. And their great culture, they, you know, their biblical real things.
That's true.
Going to Silver Spring, I went to a festival. The Ethiopians, they were almost cold.
They have a very negative energy for Black people. That's a little strange. And there's a level of, at my store too, when I first started working there, they were very like, no joke, you are not Black, like you're Ethiopian, because you're white skin, but I'm not. And the girl, I don't know Ethiopian. I didn't know shit about that. Like in the chat, there's that is so. There is a lot to. It's a sucky. Our work is complicated because there's a lot to do on the ground that is not just like stuff like this. You know what I mean? Like I feel very satisfied with the fact that we have a financially successful co-op and that we can come and do stuff like this and I can talk to you all about the work that we do. Some of the minutiae and stuff like that of like, we are this, but at the same time, as a Black woman in my store, I don't always feel fulfilled by racial relations. At the same time, I'm a Muslim convert, and that's because a lot of my coworkers are Tanzanian, and I fuck with them. Like those are my brothers. That's very different. Seriously, they're awesome. It's like seriously. That's a and the capital, isn't that right? That's a trip. I think it's different though, because Muslims are a lot more, I don't know what everybody's experience is. My experience with most Muslims anywhere is just like a certain openness that is not the same with Ethiopia. They're like Orthodox Christian, and even that's exclusive. Like their religion is only for like their people. Yeah, it's a lot different. Sorry to any Ethiopians in the chat. I'm That's, yes, that's 100%.
It's not just.
It's a certain supremacy, and even the Ethiopians I work with have talked a little bit about their relationship to being colonized is different than other African countries. Like they're very like friends with Italians in a way that other Africans don't feel like kin with the people that were. It's just a whole different, their history is completely different than everybody else's in that way. Are you serious?
No, I'm asking that question.
Oh, I don't.
Then there's South African, like in northern African countries where their birth certificate is designated as Caucasian.
That's crazy.
Um,
What if you're from the Caucasus? I don't really know how all that works. Anyway, thank you guys so much.
No, thank you.
Thanks. Well, I appreciate it. And we actually did, what time is it?
7:50.